Ever catch yourself wishing you could, like, influence someone's mind?
Hmm.
Not, in a creepy way or anything, just uh, get them to see your side of things.
Right, right. Yeah.
Well, way back in 1908, there was this guy, William Walker Atkinson, and he wrote this whole book about it. It's called, get this, Practical Mental Influence and Mental Fascination.
Catchy title.
Right. And let me tell you, this book, it's a trip.
It really does tap into this, well, kind of timeless human desire, to understand how the mind works, especially all the hidden stuff, the stuff we don't usually see.
Yeah, totally. And back then, this whole idea that your thoughts could actually, like, do stuff in the real world, people were really fascinated by it.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to do in this deep dive is we're going to unpack some of Atkinson's more, let's just say, intriguing claims about mental influence. See if there's anything in there, any wisdom that we can, use in our own lives today.
Good luck with that.
I know, right? Some of it's pretty out there.
Well, you got to remember, Atkinson, he was a big deal in the New Thought movement, and they were really into this whole idea that your thoughts could shape your reality.
Right.
Now, we're not saying that's like a scientific fact or anything,
Of course not.
but just looking at how those beliefs kind of played out in his work, I think it can teach us a lot, even if it's just historical context,
Totally. And hey, maybe we'll get a few laughs along the way.
Oh, I'm sure of it.
So Atkinson, he kicks things off with this whole law of vibration thing. He says that, get this, everything vibrates. Thoughts, objects, everything. And here's the kicker. He thought that these vibrations could, like, mess with each other, influence each other.
It's almost like he was imagining this invisible web connecting everything.
Like everything is, like, resonating at its own frequency or something.
And he uses music to explain it.
Yeah.
Says different mental states, different thoughts you're having. They're like musical notes. Each one has its own like vibrational signature.
Okay, that's a little out there, maybe.
Maybe a bit.
But it's still interesting, Like, he's playing with these ideas that, while maybe not scientifically accurate back then, they kind of sound like some of the stuff you hear about now, like energy fields and all that.
It's important to keep in mind, though, just because something resonates with people doesn't mean it's, backed up by evidence.
For sure, for sure. But like you were saying, it's more about the way people were thinking back then.
Yeah, exactly. Like, think about how people knew there had to be more to light than what we could see. And that led to discovering X-rays, radio waves, all that.
I never thought about it like that. That's a good point.
That's like a little glimpse into how people were trying to make sense of the universe, even back then.
Totally. Okay, so we got these thought vibrations. But how did Atkinson think you could actually use them? Like, to influence someone?
Well, that's where mental induction comes in. Mental induction. It's like, imagine you could project your thoughts right into someone else's head, like sending a signal straight to their mind.
Well, hold on now. That sounds like a little sci-fi, don't you think?
Hmm.
Did he actually believe everyone could do this?
Well, he seemed to think it was more like a skill you could develop.
Okay.
Like, if you really concentrated your thoughts, you could make someone else kind of have similar thoughts or feelings even.
Right.
He said it was the same principle behind like how emotions can be contagious.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Or how a really good speaker can like totally get a crowd fired up.
Right. So, like, if I'm feeling super confident before I give a presentation, my confident vibes, they're going to, like, rub off on everyone else.
Basically, yeah. He even went as far as to say that whole cities, they could have their own like collective mental atmosphere based on the thoughts and emotions of everyone living there.
Wild.
Right.
It's funny how these ideas, even though they were written so long ago, they still kind of resonate with people today. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, that's what the law of attraction is all about, isn't it?
It is. And just like with the law of attraction, it's important to, take it all with a grain of salt.
Oh, for sure.
It's easy to get carried away, start thinking our thoughts have all this like magical power. But we got to remember, things are usually more complicated than that.
Yeah. Just because I'm like really, really focused on getting that promotion doesn't mean it's just going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need the skills, you got to put in the work. Sometimes it's even just luck,
Totally.
But Atkinson, even though he was really into the whole mind power thing, he did say that action was important too.
Okay, so it's not enough to just like sit around and think about it all day.
Nope. He said you got to actually do something about it.
So thoughts are important, but they're not everything.
Exactly. It's like they're the spark, but you got to do the work to build the fire.
I like that. Okay, so that's mental induction or, thought projection or whatever you want to call it. What else did Atkinson have up his sleeve when it came to, like, mastering your mind?
Well, he gets really into this technique he calls mental concentration. And it's all about like training your mind to focus, like a laser beam.
Oh, okay. Like how athletes use visualization.
Exactly.
I've heard that focusing on what you want to happen can actually change how your brain, like, gets ready to do stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? And Atkinson was talking about this stuff over 100 years ago.
Mm.
He was really ahead of his time, talking about the importance of like quieting your mind, getting rid of distractions, basically just getting really, really focused.
Oh, man, do we need that now more than ever, right? With social media and notifications and everything, it's like our brains are fried.
Seriously.
It's constant.
And that's where I think Atkinson's ideas about mental discipline are really helpful.
Even if they are a little out there sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. But he wasn't just talking about like achieving your goals or whatever. It was more about cultivating this inner strength, this mental clarity.
Interesting. So it's less about controlling the world outside and more about, like, mastering your own mind.
Exactly. So you're not controlled by it.
That's pretty deep.
Ah,
Okay, so we've got mental concentration. What's next on Atkinson's Mind Mastery Tour?
well, now he takes us into the world of mental imaging.
Mental imaging, what's that all about?
It's kind of like a very early version of what we call creative visualization today.
Oh, okay. Like vision boards and stuff. I actually have a vision board. It's pretty cool.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Atkinson believed that by creating this really vivid picture in your mind of what you want, you could actually, in a way, influence things in the real world to match it.
So if I'm, like, constantly picturing myself rocking that job interview, I'm
Yeah.
sending out successful vibes or something?
That's the basic idea, yeah. He even called this mental picture a mental matrix, like a blueprint for reality to follow.
A blueprint, huh? Interesting.
Now, do our thoughts literally shape reality? Who knows? But one thing we know for sure is that our beliefs, they definitely influence our actions.
That's true.
If you think you're going to succeed, you're more likely to act in ways that will help you succeed.
It's like that saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't.
You're right. Exactly.
Okay, I'm following you. But there's this other part of the book, and this is where I started to get a little, I don't know, it just seemed a little shady.
Oh.
Yeah, it's called mental fascination.
Ah, yes.
And it's all about, like, using special techniques to, fascinate people, influence them.
That's definitely one of his more controversial chapters.
Yeah, wouldn't you say?
He talks about things like making strong eye contact, using a certain tone of voice.
Oh, okay, so, like, being more commanding.
Exactly. Even just standing up straight can make a difference.
Body language.
Exactly.
Okay.
All to try to basically make people more open to your suggestions.
Okay, I mean, that kind of makes sense in a way.
Right.
Like if you're trying to be a good leader or something.
Right.
But then it gets a little weird because he starts talking about, like, cultivating your personal magnetism and having a magnetic gaze.
Right. Right.
And that's when I was like, is this ethical?
I think it's important to remember, again, the context of when he was writing. Hypnotism was becoming really popular.
Wow.
People were obsessed with this idea of, like, influencing the subconscious mind.
It was like the trendy thing back then.
Exactly. But you're right. It does bring up some ethical questions. Like, could these techniques be used for, not so good purposes?
That's what I'm wondering. Like, the chapter is literally called Mental Fascination. It just sounds kind of ominous,
It does have a bit of a ring to it, doesn't it? But to be fair to Atkinson, he does dedicate a whole chapter later on to, like, protecting yourself from mental influence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He talks about building up your defenses, being aware of people trying to manipulate you.
So it's like a mental self-defense course. I like
Yeah, he really emphasizes the importance of, like, thinking for yourself.
Okay, but before we get too far into that, how much of this fascination stuff is actually, real?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And unfortunately, like with most things about the brain, the answer is complicated.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to these mental self-defense techniques,
Yeah.
you might be surprised to hear Atkinson doesn't get all, mystical about it.
Oh, no, like special crystals or anything?
Nope, nothing like that. It's actually very practical. He says the most important thing is to build up a strong mind, independent. Like you're building up your mental immune system.
Ooh, a mental immune system.
Yeah.
I like that. So how do we do that? How do we build this, like, mental shield?
It's all about critical thinking. Question everything. Don't just, like, automatically believe what people tell you.
Even if they seem, like, really convincing.
Especially then.
Okay, okay.
You gotta remember, not everyone has your best interests at heart. And sometimes the most persuasive people, they're the ones trying to sell you something you don't need.
Man, isn't that the truth? It's like everywhere you look now, someone's trying to sell you something. Influencers, ads.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that's why I think the stuff that Atkinson was saying, even though it was written over 100 years ago, it's still so relevant.
totally.
Cultivate a discerning mind. Be curious. Question your assumptions.
Don't be afraid to think for yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's how we protect ourselves from, like, the direct influence attempts.
Yeah.
But what about all that other stuff with the, thought vibrations and all that? How do you deal with that?
Well, Atkinson was a big believer in positive thinking.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And not just for like achieving your goals. He thought it could actually create a kind of mental shield.
Interesting. So you're not just protecting yourself from, like, other people's bad vibes, but you're also, like, creating a positive force field around yourself.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
He said that if you focus on positive thoughts, positive emotions, it makes you less susceptible to negativity in general.
So it's like you're creating this inner environment where negativity just can't take root as easily.
Exactly. Because our minds are always interacting with the world.
Yeah.
Right. On a conscious level, sure, but on a subconscious level,
Oh,
too.
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all had those days where it's like, where did all this negativity come from?
Exactly. And we might not be able to control every little thought that pops into our heads, but we can choose which ones we, like, focus on, which
Yeah.
ones we give power to.
It's like choosing what you feed your mind, right?
Yes. A mental diet. I love that.
Right. Feed it good stuff, and it'll be strong and healthy. Feed it junk, and well.
You get the idea.
And honestly, that's what I think is so great about diving into these old books, even if some of the ideas are, a little out there.
I agree.
It reminds us that we have more control over our minds than we think.
That's a really important point. We're not just like passive passengers. We have choices.
Exactly. We get to choose what we think about, what we focus on, what we let influence us.
Atkinson might not have gotten everything right, but I think he was onto something with that.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for this deep dive into William Walker Atkinson's, what was it called again?
Practical mental influence and mental fascination.
That's the one. And hey, even if you don't buy into the whole magnetic gaze thing,
Which, for the record, we don't recommend trying at home.
definitely not. But even still, I think there's a lot we can take away from his ideas about, the power of focus and belief and really mastering your own mind.
Couldn't agree more.
So until next time, keep those minds curious and remember, you've got more power than you think.